Everyone expected me to cry. I had been saving that smile for exactly this moment. The hall was full to the rafters the night Ivar chose. The whole pack had come to see their alpha take a Luna, and they had come, if I am honest, half to see me too, the Omega he had been bonded to since the spring thaw, the small, quiet woman who kept his records and never raised her voice. They wanted to know what my face would do when he stood at the high seat and reached his hand not toward me, but toward Lady Sunniva, gold-haired and certain, in a gown the colour of fresh blood. I will tell you what my face did. It smiled. I am 25. I have been an Omega my whole life, which means I have spent that life being handled, placed, assigned, married off in talk before I was old enough to object, valued at exactly the weight of my usefulness and not one grain more. I had learned a great many ways to survive being the lowest wolf in any room. The most important one is this: never let them see the thing they are hoping to see. The pack had come for my tears. I would not give them a single one. So I smiled. I straightened my spine until it ached. And when Ivar looked at me at last, and he did look, because some weak part of him needed to watch me break, I held his eyes, and I inclined my head the precise depth one offers a stranger of equal rank, and I turned. And I walked the whole length of that hall through 300 silent people, and I did not look back. No one stopped me. That part matters. No collar, no command, no alpha's word held me to that pack. I walked out of my own will, into the cold, and the only thing I took with me was a pair of well-worn boots and the small bitter satisfaction of denying them the show. I want to say, I felt nothing. I felt the bond. That was the thing no one in that hall knew, the thing I did not fully understand myself until much later. Ivar had chosen another in front of his whole pack, but he had never spoken the words that sever a mate bond. He had simply turned away, the way a careless man drops something he assumes will still be there when he wants it. And so the bond did not break. It frayed. It hung in me like a live wire someone had cut at one end and left swinging, and I carried it out the door with me, sparking, into the silence of the rest of my life. Why he left it unspoken, I could not say. Whether he meant to keep a thread on me, or simply could not be troubled to finish what he started, I did not know. That was the question I walked north with. That, and one other thing I had noticed, and could not place. A single figure among the visiting banners at the back of that hall, a man in dark furs who had not looked away when I passed, and who had not, unlike all the rest, looked pleased. I told myself I had imagined it. I had a great deal of road ahead, and no use for ghosts. Greymantle Hold sits 8 days north of everything I had ever known, a greystone keep above a greystone sea, and it took me most of those 8 days to stop expecting a rider to come fetch me back. None came. I arrived with blistered feet and a satchel of nothing, and offered the only thing I had ever truly owned, that I could read, and write a fair, clean hand, and keep a set of accounts no steward could cook behind my back. They had a record room 3 years behind, and a steward who had recently been hanged for exactly the cooking I described. They took me on. I expect you think you know what happens next. The discarded Omega arrives. The Great King notices her, and the story is about how the man who threw her away comes to understand what he lost. I thought I knew it too. I was wrong about nearly all of it, and the first thing I was wrong about was the wolf. I had been at Greymantle a month before I saw the king. Garrick of the North kept to his own council and his own halls, and I kept to the record room, which suited me down to the ground. I had heard the things one hears, that he had lost his first mate young, years before, and never taken another, that he was a careful man, courteous to the point of stiffness, who ran his lands well and smiled rarely, and never, ever, did anything without thinking it through 3 times first. A man, in other words, who was the precise opposite of Ivar in every way that I had been taught to want. which is perhaps why I noticed nothing at all about him for a while. Then came the autumn gathering, when the whole hold packs into the great hall to settle the year's disputes, and I was sent up from the records to read out the tallies, and the king's wolf chose me in front of everyone. It came down off the dais where it had been lying at Garrick's feet, a huge dark beast, black going to iron at the muzzle, and it crossed the whole crowded hall, while I stood there with a ledger in my hands and my voice gone to nothing, and it sat down directly in front of me, and it looked up at me. And it did not move again for the rest of the evening. I knew what it meant. Everyone in that hall knew what it meant. A wolf does not leave its alpha's side to choose, in open court, the newest and lowest creature in the room. It is a transgression of the whole order of things. And it was happening to me. In public, in front of a court full of strangers, the one thing in all the world I had sworn I would never let happen to me again. To be chosen in front of everyone. To have the whole room turn and look and decide what my face would do. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I smiled. The same smile. And I straightened my spine, and I finished reading the tallies to the last copper with a wolf the size of a pony staring up at me like I had hung the moon. I did not look at the king once. I was too busy not falling down. But I heard him afterward, in the press at the doors, speaking low to the broad, quiet man who was always at his shoulder, Cedric, his second, who I would come to like a great deal. "Find out who she is," Garrick said, "and then leave her entirely alone. She did not come here to be looked at. It was the single most useful thing anyone had said about me in years, and he had said it to someone else, believing I could not hear. That, I have come to understand, was the whole of the man. He courted me the way another man fights a war. I do not know when it began, exactly, because it began so badly. A new lamp appeared in the record room, a good one, the kind that does not smoke, left without a note, which I assumed was the steward's doing until the steward asked where I had gotten it. A second chair, when there had only ever been one. The fire in my little room, which had been laid cold every evening, began somehow to be laid warm. I caught no one at it. I was, by then, very good at catching people at things, and I caught no one, which told me more than catching someone would have. And then he started leaving books. Not love poems, I want to be clear. The man left me a treatise on Northern tithe law. He left me a history of the hold's water rights. He left me, on one memorable occasion, a closely argued monograph on the drainage of marshland, with a passage underlined that genuinely did bear on a dispute I was untangling. When I finally cornered him about it, I am not a woman who lets a thing lie, he went the particular shade of a man who has prepared a speech, and lost it. "You read," he said. I thought. "That is, they are good books, they are extremely dry books, my lord." Yes, he looked stricken. "I did not know if you liked flowers. Books seemed safer. One can return a book without," he stopped. He started again. "I did not want to send anything you would feel obliged to keep." I stood there in the record room, with a treatise on marsh drainage in my hands, and felt something in me do a thing I had told it firmly never to do again. Because here is what no one tells you about being discarded in front of 300 people. It does not make you sad, in the end. It makes you suspicious. Ivar had wanted me when I was useful and pleasant and quiet, and the moment a better arrangement walked in wearing red, he had reached past me without a thought. So I had learnt to read affection, the way I read a steward's accounts, looking for the place where someone is taking more than they give. And I could not find it in Garrick. I looked hard. The man gave and gave. Warmth, books, a chair, the careful and consistent gift of never once asking me to perform anything in return. And he took nothing, and he never made it a debt. It unnerved me more than cruelty would have. Cruelty, at least, I knew the shape of. I understood it the day Ivar came north. He came with banners, and a proposal of alliance. My old Alpha, riding into Greymantle's grey courtyard, a season after I had walked out of his hall, and the first I knew of it was the bond. I was in the record room, and it woke, that frayed live wire, sparking, the way it did sometimes in my sleep, and I knew before any horn sounded that he was within these walls. I stood up so fast I overturned the good lamp. He found me by evening. He had asked, of course. Everyone in the hold knew the king's wolf had chosen the Omega scribe, and Ivar had always had a nose for the thing he could spoil. He came to the record room alone, and stood in the door, and looked at me with an expression I had once mistaken for fondness, and now recognized as appetite. "You smiled," he said, "when I chose her. I have thought about that smile for a season." He took a step in. "I made an error, Vesna. I have come to set it right. Sunniva was a mistake. The bond is still there. You have felt it as I have. Come home. Be my Luna. I will speak it before the whole pack. I should have spoken for you the first time." There it was. The thing the whole world expects of a story like mine. The man who threw me away, on his knees in the doorway, offering me the very throne he had denied me, asking me to come home. And I waited to feel triumphant, and I felt nothing at all except the bond's dull ache and a great and weary clarity. "You did not make an error," I told him. "You made a choice. You stood in front of 300 people, and you chose. I have spent a season being told this story is about you realizing what you lost." I set down my pen. "But you have not realized anything. You are not here because you understand me. You are here because something I have is being valued by someone else, and you cannot bear that a thing you discarded turned out to be worth keeping. That is not love, Ivar. That is a child wanting back the toy another child picked up." He went white. He had not expected the scribe to have a tongue. "They never do. The bond," he said, lower now, dangerous. "I never severed it. You are still mine by the bond, whatever your mouth says. You never severed it, because severing it would have cost you something," I said, "and you have never in your life paid for anything. You left it hanging so you would always have a thread on me. You did not even want me. You wanted the door left open, in case you changed your mind." I found I was no longer afraid of him at all. "Get out of my record room, my lord. You are standing on the light." He went. But I had made an enemy of him in that moment, and worse, though I did not know it yet, I had made one long before, of the woman in the red gown, who had not come north for an alliance at all. Sunniva had come because a discarded Omega being chosen by a second king made her own choosing look like the theft it was, and she meant to put me back in the dirt where the story said I belonged. If you have ever had to learn, late and the hard way, the difference between being wanted and being valued, I would dearly like to know. I am not telling this into the dark. If the story has found you somewhere it matters, stay with me and subscribe. The part I most need you to hear is the next one. The night I finally understood what that quiet man had been doing all along. And why. The thing I had not understood about Garrick, I learnt that same night. And I did not learn it from him. I learnt it from Cedric, his second, who found me on the cliff wall where I had gone to let the wind scour Ivar's voice out of my head, and who stood with me a while, and then said, carefully, "The way you set down something fragile, you should know the king was there. At the Eastern Hold, the night your Alpha chose. Garrick was the visiting king at the back of that hall." I went very still. "He does not know I am telling you," Cedric said. "He would not want it used to move you. He is the sort of fool who thinks that would be a kind of pressure." He looked out at the black water. "But I have served him 20 years, and I watched him come home from that gathering changed, and I think you have earned the truth of it. He saw you walk out. The whole hall was waiting for the Omega to break, and you smiled instead, and you walked the length of that floor like a queen, and he could not look away." He said. Cedric stopped, and when he went on his voice had roughened. He said he had buried a wife who was never once chosen out loud the way she deserved, and that he had just watched it happen to a stranger. And that if the gods were ever fool enough to put that woman in his path again, he would spend whatever was left of him making sure she never had to wonder if she was chosen. And then a year later, you walked into his courtyard with blistered feet asking for work. The wind came off the sea, and I let it take the thing my face was doing. The lamp. The chair, the dry, careful books one could return without obligation. The order, find out who she is, and then leave her entirely alone. It had never been a stiff man fumbling at romance. It had been a vow, kept in the only language he trusted, which was patience and small, steady acts, and the scrupulous, deliberate refusal to ever once make me feel watched. He had been chosen by no one when it mattered, and so had I, and he had decided, quietly, completely, a year before he ever spoke to me, that whatever else he failed at, he would not fail me the way we had both been failed. I did not go to him that night. I was not ready. But I stopped, somewhere on that cliff wall, looking for the place where he was taking more than he gave, because I finally understood there was no such place. There never had been. I had 3 days of that fragile new understanding before Sunniva took it apart. She did it the way clever, cruel women do it. Not with a fist, but with a whisper, dressed as concern. By the second day of the alliance talks, the hold was thick with a story. That the king's Omega scribe was a known mate thief. That she had bewitched a beast to climb above her station. That she was Ivar's discard and Garrick's fool, and the whole north was laughing at a grieving widower, throwing his dignity at a woman 300 people had watched be passed over. The court that had been merely cool to me went colder. The alliance, which the north needed, began to fray on the question of whether Greymantle's king had lost his judgment to a low-born woman. That was the first blow, and it landed. But it was the second she meant to be fatal. On the third day, a letter was found. It was found, conveniently, by one of Sunniva's own women, in my record room, half burned in my grate. A letter in my hand, to Ivar, agreeing to keep the bond, promising to carry word of Garrick's plans south, signing myself still his. It was a good forgery. It was a very good forgery. It was good enough that when they brought it before Garrick in the great hall, with both courts assembled and Ivar watching, and Sunniva's face arranged into sorrow, I saw the king look at it, and I saw, for one endless heartbeat, the thing every discarded creature dreads most. I saw him begin to wonder. The hall waited for me to break. I knew that wait. I had walked out of it once already. "May I see it?" I said. They gave me the letter. My hands did not shake, which surprised me. I had kept the records of 2 packs, and I knew my own hand the way I knew my own name. And I knew, the moment I held it, 3 things. And I said them plainly to the whole assembled court, because I have learned that the truth said quietly in a loud room cuts deeper than any shout. "This is my hand," I said. "It is a very good copy of my hand. But I cross my 7s, here, in the northern way I learned in this room, this autumn, and whoever wrote this crossed them in the southern way I have not used since I left Ivar's hold. So either I forgot how I write in the middle of betraying a king, or this was written by someone working from old records of my hand. Southern records," I turned the page over, "and it is sealed in green wax. I have requisitioned the stores of this hold for a season. We keep no green wax. Lady Sunniva's party brought 3 cakes of it north. It is itemized in the very ledger I keep, in my crossed northern 7s, which anyone may read." I looked up. I did not write this, but I can tell you who had my old hand to copy, and green wax to seal it, and a season's worth of reasons. The hall was silent. It was the good kind of silence, the kind that turns. And Sunniva, who was clever, made the one mistake clever people make, which is that she could not bear to lose quietly. "She is lying," she said, "too fast. Burn it and be done. There is nothing to read in a scrap of." Burn the evidence, I said. Yes, that would be convenient. Tell me, my lady, how did you know it was half burned? You were not in the room when it was found. I had not known it either, until she told me. The whole court watched her understand what she had said. That is the part where, if this were Ivar's hall, they would have cheered. Greymantle did not cheer. It simply turned, all of it, away from the woman in red and toward the king, and waited to see what he would do. What he did was the bravest, most foolish thing I have ever seen a powerful man do, and he did it before I had cleared my own name fully, while the hall still hung in the balance, which is the only way it counts. Garrick rose. He did not look at the letter. He looked at Ivar, and at the southern banners, and at the alliance the whole north needed, and he set it down like a man setting down a weight he had decided not to carry. The terms your party offered this morning, he said to Ivar, included that I send the woman south with you, as a gesture of good faith, to put the matter of the bond to rest. I have considered it. His voice was perfectly even. I will not. I would sooner have no alliance with the South than buy one by handing a woman back to the man who threw her away in front of his whole pack. If that costs Greymantle the southern roads, then it costs Greymantle the southern roads, and I will answer to my people for it. I will not answer to myself for the other thing. The hall made a sound. Cedric, beside him, closed his eyes like a man whose king has just leapt off a wall and trusts him to land. He had chosen me, publicly, at cost, in front of everyone, the exact thing that had been done to me in reverse, by a man doing the opposite. And he had done it before I was safe, before it was easy, when it could still have ruined him. So I did the last thing, the thing I had carried north like a live wire. The thing only I could do. I stepped up onto the dais, uninvited, an Omega, in a hall full of 2 kings and their courts, and I gripped the cold iron rail of it until I felt the edge bite into my palms. And I looked at Ivar, and I severed the bond myself. You cannot know what that costs unless you have done it. A bond is not a string. It has roots, grown down into everything you are. And when I reached for it and spoke the old words of refusal, the words he had been too careless to ever speak, the choice he had stolen from me, it did not come loose. It fought. The cold of it came up through me like winter driven into the marrow, the whole hall greying at the edges, and the roots tore as they came, and I felt every one of them go, and the iron rail cut my palms where I held it to stay standing, and I stayed standing. I will not break in front of these people. I had built my whole self on that sentence. I built it one more time, in the worst cold I have ever known, and I finished the words, I, Vesna, refuse this bond, and the one who left it unspoken, and I take back the choosing he would not give me. It broke. It went out of me all at once, the live wire dead at last, and the cold let go, and I stood on the dais with blood in my fists and my spine straight, and I was, for the first time in my life, bound to no one and chosen by myself. I looked at Garrick. I have spent my whole life being chosen by other people, I said, or not. I find I would like, just once, to do the choosing. And in front of both courts, with my hands bleeding and my voice steadier than I had any right to, I crossed the dais to him, and I made the claim no one had ever let me make. I will not tell you about the kiss. Except this, it was not for the hall. It was the first thing I had ever done in a crowded room that was only mine. And when something in me that had been bracing for a blow my whole life finally set the brace down, I understood that I had not lost anything in Ivar's hall after all. I had only been carrying it to the right one. The cost came after, as it always does. The Southern Alliance collapsed, and the North felt the lack of it through a hard winter, and there were lords at Greymantle who muttered that a king should not break a treaty over a scribe. Garrick answered them one by one, in council, at length, with the patience of a man who has decided what he is, and will not be argued out of it. Ivar rode south a smaller man than he came. The story of the Omega who severed her own bond on his dais travelled faster than his horses, and a pack does not long respect an alpha a discarded woman walked away from twice. Soniva did not ride with him. Her own people, it turned out, did not care to be allied to a forger. She was sent north and east to a holding so far from anything that the green wax will have nowhere to go. I am told the cold there is considerable. I find I bear it. A year on, I am writing this in the record room that is still mine, because I would not give it up for the world, though they have offered me grander ones. There is a bowl of clean light from a lamp that does not smoke, and a second chair that is rarely empty now, and at the foot of my bed there is a pair of boots. I had them resoled twice this year. I keep meaning to throw them out. They are the boots I walked north in, and for a long time I kept them laced and ready at the foot of the bed, the way you keep a thing you might need in the night, in case the door, in case the cold, in case I had to walk again. I noticed, this spring, that I had not touched them in months. They sit there, gathering dust by the warm hearth, and I let them, because I like to look at them. They remind me that the most important thing I ever did was put them on and refuse to cry. The letter came at the thaw, from an old woman in Ivar's pack, who had stood at the back of that hall the night I smiled, who wrote simply that she had told her granddaughters the story, the one about the Omega, who walked out without a tear and built a winter of her own up north. She wanted to know if it was true that I was Luna of Greymantle now. I wrote back that it was, and that I was, and that the smile I had been saving had finally found something worth spending itself on, and that it was nothing at all like the one I gave that hall, that the first smile had been armour, and this one was just a smile, and I had not known, until I had one of each, how much I had been missing. So tell me, did you see it, the moment the story turned out not to be about the man who lost me at all? Or did you wait, like I did, for him to matter, and find he simply never did again? Leave it below. I read every one. And if you would like to know how a discarded Omega learned to hold a court that did not want her, how a king who fights his wars by lamplight finally stopped flinching, then stay and subscribe, and I will tell you the rest. There is a great deal of it. Winters are long up here, and we have nothing but time. Wherever you are listening from tonight, keep your good boots by the door, and your real smile for someone who will know what it is worth.